I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding. From the words I spit, so sharp, so freezing. So cold, behold, frostbite they feeling. I could tear you apart or I could go heal them. Don't believe in fate, don't believe in ceilings. I just need a taste and my mind starts peeling. I don't pace myself, I grind on kneeling. Got lust for change, I just love the feeling. I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. And I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. Cause I'ma live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I go by at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time, and I'll soon be winning. I live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have...
Hello everyone, how are you doing today? This is another episode of Secular Activism Unfiltered. I am your host, Kelly, the Detroit Atheist Queen, and today I have on here a special guest, Felicia by nature.
Hey!
Hello.
Hello. How's everyone doing? What's up, Kelly?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm excellent. Very excellent. Taking time out of my day to do the interview, and that means I'm not at work, and I like that.
I really appreciate you coming on. Yes, AJ is talking about your hoodie as well. I talked about it backstage. It is so cute.
Yeah, my little opossum hoodie. It's got the little Joey on the head right there. We'll be talking opossums in a bit, and why that's important. So
Yes.
And I got little paws too. Look.
Oh, that's even better. That's even better. So, the first question that I like to ask is, were you ever religious?
Was I ever religious? That's a loaded question. No, I was absolutely religious early on in my life. I was born into a Catholic family and went to Catholic school my entire life up until college. And right up until high school, I basically prepared myself for seminary. I was going to enter seminary after high school. I had my application to Mundelein all written up. For those of you who don't know what Mundelein is, it's a Catholic seminary out in Chicago. People equate it to basically being on par with studying at the Vatican. And very, very prestigious within the Catholic Church. And I had 2 letters of recommendations. I had a sponsor lined up who was going to pay for me to enter seminary and go through seminary. And basically at the last moment, I backed out, and not out of cowardice or anything, but I asked my brother O'Connell, is the Bible true? And it was a kind of a personal conversation we had. And we were just sitting together, and he told me, honestly, I tell them it's absolutely true, but if I'm being perfectly honest, no, it's not. And that's when I decided maybe I shouldn't be doing this. So I was very religious early on, and had a slow intellectual deconstruction. I didn't have a dramatic evangelical deconstruction. I had a philosophical, inquisitive deconstruction that lasted, I want to say, a good 10 years or so before I finally decided to say, no, I'm definitely an atheist. God doesn't exist. And this is a very nice story. This comforts people, but this is not for me. And so, here I am.
So, how old do you think you were about that age when you decided religion was bullshit, as I say?
Well, let's see, it was about 19 when I turned away from Mundelein. I want to say that I became like full-on non-spiritual atheist as in there's not even like ghosts or anything or any sort of soul inhabiting meat bodies. Probably around 29 or 30.
Okay, so yeah, I deconstructed about 40.
That's
um,
fair.
it took time for me to get to that point. Now, after you left religion, how when did you start? Because can really call you an activist, and we talked about that backstage. But when did you start wanting to be more than just somebody who doesn't believe
Um,
in God anymore?
a couple of years ago, so I was obviously one of those people who was not involved in, but I was certainly circling around the new atheism movement, and I never really latched onto it because I always found it to be a sort of distasteful reaction in the public consciousness to Islam. And I kind of felt like the reasons people were latching onto it were mostly negative, even though the reasoning that they presented was solid, rather not the Islam stuff, the God stuff. Um, I felt like the social consensus around it was wrong, and so I never really gravitated towards that. When it came to like my atheism today, I would say it's about maybe 5 years ago or so, where I started really watching this content online, especially from the evangelical community about God and religion, and I thought I'd start looking into it again and see maybe I missed something. And the more I watched, the more I read, and I started reading works by people like William Lane Craig, Alvin Plantinga, even process theologians like J. Orr, Whitehead, things like that. I uh, I quickly realized that the apologetics side of things was being obtusely dishonest in their approach to intellectualism, to intellectual pursuits, and the theologian side of things already presupposed God. They never really answered the question of God. They just presuppose it and then think outwards from there. And I felt like both sides were incomplete. And then I kept listening to more and more atheist content. I would listen to AXP. I would listen to The Line, Matt Dillahunty, Bridge the Divide. JL is one of my top subs. I absolutely have to watch his stuff. There are other atheist creators, Logic as well. But there's one through line I've noticed, and that it's all the same debate. When you boil it down, it's all like the same question. And so I've been working on a project recently to address that question, but that's sort of where I stand. Like I'm more on the does this question even make sense side of the argument. Not is God real, but does asking the question does God exist even make sense? And that's sort of where my interest lies and where my projects sort of hedge towards in terms of their intellectual space. I'm not the you're wrong because the Kalam cosmological argument misses X, Y, and Z about scientific models. I'm more along the lines of, okay, let's assume you're right. What are the consequences of you being right? And does that make sense as applied to reality as we experience it? And that's where the Opie paradox came from. That's where like the opossum stuff comes from. And that's where my relational atheism project that I'm slowly building right now is coming
I do
from.
want to dive into that, definitely.
Mhm.
I do want to dive into that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can talk about a lot of different things. You let me know, and we'll control the
I
flow.
was in this conversation already. Um, I don't know why I'm coughing now. Geez, thank you, buddy, for coughing. That's one thing that I will say with me is that, and I left the evangelical church. I was there for several years. In high school, I joined on my own. And the one thing that I will say is that every time we would get into an argument with someone who hasn't, they can even be another spice of Christianity. We always pick up that Bible. But how can you debate something with the same thing? And
And
I didn't realize that when I was going through that I was doing that. But this what the scripture says in this verse, such and such.
and that's the weirdest thing about modern evangelical Christianity, the pathway towards biblical inerrancy, especially the biblical inerrancy doctrine of Chicago of was it 1976 or something like that, which just sort of led to modern evangelicalism. It's it's really weird to take that position. It's a very modern position for starters, but it's also extremely extremely historically ignorant of where evangelical Christianity came from, where Protestantism came from, and the historical roots of Christianity, which have historically been more rooted in philosophical debate and intellectualism than they have been in strict scriptural adherence. And so I find the very strict evangelical world that exists today to be bizarre, just an absolute bizarre corruption of what Christianity used to be. And especially with my upbringing in a New York Catholic school, with, I've had extensive philosophical training and theological training, going through both grade school and high school. I learned about Thomas Aquinas and all of these fun things in grade school, let alone the papers I had to write in high school for theology classes. So when I listen to modern debates about that evangelicals like Frank Turek or J. Warder Wallace will give, um, I'm extremely confused, because to make the arguments they make is to ignore their own history. And so you have to be astonishingly ignorant of where you came from in order to even make some of the claims that they make. And intellectually, that bothers me. I find that to be a gross misrepresentation of your own history. And and it's kind of a shame. It is kind of a shame, because they want to lean on intellectually capable arguments from people like Thomas Aquinas, from people like Aristotle, but they want to ignore the fact they came at a different point in history when Christianity was interpreted much, much differently than it is today.
Yeah,
So
it is.
I find it disturbing.
Yeah, just like the last church that I was a part of was a Baptist, small Baptist, Southern Baptist church. And so, two things that happened. One was he started to allow me to speak, give maybe not like the full sermon, but then another lady became a deacon. And then eventually she became the assistant pastor. And a lot of people didn't like that because the woman was speaking in public, which is, according to the Bible, that's not what you're supposed to do. We're supposed to be silent.
A literal interpretation of the Bible would lead you to that conclusion, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But he
but
was like, in my church, we equal.
Yeah, I do want to address Jason in the chat. I love the conflict between
Which one?
Catholicism and the First Commandment. It's an interesting comment, because on the face of it, yes, you're correct. There is a direct contradiction between Catholicism's worship of Mary and the First Commandment. However, keep in mind that Catholicism also historically, traditionally, I don't know about today, I haven't been in the church for 20 years, but has historically kept the tradition of philosophical and intellectual intrigue and debate. And so for them to embrace Mary is more based on theological debate and the tradition of the Catholic Church than it is on strict scriptural adherence. So from that frame of reference, they're not in conflict with the first commandment. That being said, it's a silly religion. It's but when you approach a Catholic about it, especially a Catholic who's trained in this sort of stuff, you have to approach it with the understanding that they are coming at this with an understood history of Catholicism, whereby they have taken the theological approach to Mary, and not the strict evangelical approach to the Bible.
Yeah, because I did go to Catholic school myself from kindergarten to the eighth grade. And I also spent a couple years, and I went to the University of Detroit Mercy, which is also a Catholic college. So I had a little bit of experience in the college scene in Catholic. But I did notice that like Mary was on a pedestal.
Mhm.
And the other churches didn't really put Mary on a pedestal. Like they mentioned her as being the Virgin Mother, but they didn't put as much emphasis as the Catholic Church did.
And I
And I
I
thought that
always
was
found
weird
that
to me.
I always found the story of Mary kind of strange too, because if you think about it, a virgin birth is not that miraculous. Things similar to that do happen in modern biology, not statistically probably, but they do have been recorded to happen. Um, I think what would be much more miraculous would be if Jesus was born of a male. Like it was straight up a guy's butt baby. Then that would be like, yo, what?
What, what somebody said, he made Adam out of dirt. Why can't make Jesus out of dirt?
I there's a fun, if you ever get stuck talking to a presuppositionalist, there's a fun little loop you can throw them into their hamster wheel of Van Tillian presuppositionalism, and that is to ask them what imago Dei means, or imago Dei means, in terms of both logic and reason, pre and
I need to
post
know if that
fall.
means now.
Imago Dei is made in the image of God. It's the Latin.
Okay.
Yeah. So if ask a presuppositionalist how logic, reason, and knowledge fit and transform pre and post fall, and how that fits with God's perfect knowledge pre-fall, and both Adam and Eve pretty much already knowing that they were going to die if they ate that fruit, and then still choosing to do it. That's not very rational, and so you can't really claim that rationality is a divine trait. It's pretty interesting to watch them spin their wheels over that one, and they'll circle around in circles about that. Or even better, a presuppositionalist who still wants to adhere to evolution, bring up imago Dei to them, and they will spin in their graves over that one, because then you're essentially asking them, so God's evolved? Are you a process theologian and not a Christian? I'm confused. It's so great to send them spinning into tangents about stuff like that. It's kind of fun.
So do you do debates now?
No, I don't do debates. I do. So the problem I have with debates is not being prepared for them. It's a performance anxiety thing, number one. But number two, to me, a debate is not the polemic you see online. What you see online is like structured, quote unquote, but they're not actual debates. To me, a debate is an intellectual process where two sides present their take on a subject, or their evidence on a subject, and then they discuss and debate those specifics, and then they set that aside, they research their positions, and then they come back with either rebuttals, or they accept the other side's position, and then they work together to form a more wholesome opinion. To me, that's a debate. That's the intellectual academic standard of debate. What you see online is not debate. It's polemics. It's posturing. It's YouTube entertainment. It's fine, but that's why I don't do it, because I'm not there to scream and play card games essentially until one side runs out of points to make and the other side can no longer deflect. And that, to me, that's just pointless. That doesn't advance anything. That's just people arguing for clicks. And that's a waste of time.
Yeah, I know when I was in high school and college, I was on a debate team, and there was a certain way to come in the room, and different things, different acts that we did, and different movements that we did as a group that kind of made people like more vote for us. And that
I agree. And Purple
theatrics.
rhymes with orange in the chat. Online debates aren't good at coming to the truth. They're more for who has more charisma. They're partially for more who has more charisma. That's why you saw people like Greg Bonson get so popular within the evangelical community, because he was very charismatic. It's why you see people like Made by Jim Bob or Jay Dyer or even Darth Dawkins, Cy Ten Brundagate gets so popular. They're very charismatic, but their arguments are trash. If you really break down their arguments, they're garbage, and it's just, there's nothing there. There's no substance there. There's nothing worth intellectually pursuing. A lot of times they'll confuse basic philosophic principles. They'll confuse epistemology with ontology, and then they'll just expect to get away with that because the interlocutor they're arguing with doesn't know the difference. And so they win by just the obfuscation of word definitions. And that's, to me, that's not debate. To me, that's just scumbaggery, you know?
One thing I will say about the online debates and the call-in shows type of situations is that when I first started watching them, I was questioning. But after I started watching, I started looking at the theists and some of their answers. That don't make no damn sense. Why am I? Why? And the atheist person is making more sense than this theist person. So I would say, at least for me, it helped me to look at some questions and answers that I had that I was not getting from a theist point of view.
And
So
that's the
that
thing that
part helped me in that situation for
and that's the thing that
viewer.
that's what really got me as a Catholic early on in my life was every time I had a question that was unanswerable or just wasn't answered yet, the answer was always, well, God works in mysterious ways. Well, to me, that's not fulfilling. That's
Not at
not
all.
that's nonsense. That's like that's me sitting there going, well, that don't make a damn sense. There's got to be an answer somewhere. What do you mean
Yes.
God works in mysterious ways? What does that mean?
That's
And that always bothered the hell out of me. It still does. Like, why are you stopping there? There are ways to investigate these questions. There are ways to investigate. If you cannot come to an answer, like let's say you absolutely cannot come to an answer on a question, then the problem is not that the question only has one answer and that answer is God. The problem is the question even formed correctly? So when you ask, is there a God? And the theist says, absolutely yes. And my evidence is I have a Bible. My answer is, where does your God interact with the world? Where is the direct measurable interaction with the world? Because we live in an empirical reality, not a metaphysical reality. Nobody's ever been able to demonstrate a metaphysical Platonic space. So where does the interaction happen? Where's that threshold between physical and metaphysical? It's got to be there somewhere if for the metaphysical to exist in a real way.
Yeah.
It's not there.
'Cause
So,
like,
so then you have to start walking back and you have to start wondering, well, does the question, does God exist, even make sense? Can you fit God into reality? And I feel like you can't, but it comes down to the real question comes down to one of ontology. So everybody that I've seen on the atheist side of things and the theist side of things argues from a substance ontology. That is, substance is primary to existence. And from a human standpoint, that makes sense logically. The problem is you can't prove that. And physics says that might not be the case. It might be the case that relation is primary, or at least co-primary with substance. That is, you can't have substance without relation. And so my project has been working from relational quantum mechanics into a sort of atheistic worldview rather than actually dealing with quantum mechanics, right? I'm not even going to pretend to be able to do the math there and provide answers, right? But rather I'm trying to frame people's minds in terms of how we relate rather than how we exist. Because once you start asking the question, well, we exist first and then relation develops, you have to answer the question, well, where did existence start? But if relation is first, then things like infinite regress start to make a hell of a lot more sense.
So, AJ, Basic Human, please ask Felicia, would a better question be, can a God exist?
Can a God exist? So in my current framework of relational atheism, the answer is probably not. In all likelihood, unless there is some super being floating around out in space out there in physical, actual timed reality that we just don't have access to for some reason, they're beyond the light horizon. No. Even a deistic God fails that test. In fact, a deistic God falls into contradiction from this type of framework, because if relation is first and the proposition of a deistic God creating everything and then exiting the relational web of reality is impossible. It's a contradiction, because the deistic God would have to literally go back in time and remove itself from ever creating things. So it would have to exist somehow in the relational web, and from everything we've seen, there's nothing that indicates that is the case.
Now, so you have a you were talking about the relative.
The relational quantum mechanics.
Yeah, and the atheism. Explain more about that. You were
Well,
telling me that.
so RQM, developed by Carlo Rovelli, is a fascinating reinterpretation of the traditional field of quantum mechanics and quantum field theory. I recommend go ahead and trying to read up on it. It took me the better part of 5 years for things to click in my head before I finally decided, oh, hey, wait a minute, I could build an ontology out of this. I could build a worldview out of this. And so it takes a long time to speak in a way that is borrowing language from RQM, but isn't quantum mechanics. I'm not like challenging Dr. Blitz to a debate on stuff. I'm more trying to form this as I'm trying to rephrase the idea or reframe the idea that we exist as actors on a stage, and trying to twist that around in people's heads and get them to understand that we're not actors on a stage. In a relational ontology, we are the stage. Everything is the stage. There's no individual actors. There's no ghosts piloting meat bags. Everything is part of the stage. Our atoms, our protons, our neutrons, our quarks, all of it is all part of the stage. There's no separation from us and reality. And that's kind of where it came from, is if relation is primary in the quantum world, that must be an emergent property of the macro level world. And so I'm trying to form a way to phrase that in a macro friendly way.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Everybody wants to know, and I don't think you talked about you setting it up, but do you have a YouTube channel?
I do have a YouTube channel, Felicia by Nature on YouTube.
Plug. Okay. I never knew that.
There you go. Yeah, I don't release regularly. I like to do deeper dives. I don't like doing the Viced Rhino or Logic type of regular release schedule. I like to really break down intellectual or at least semi-intellectual arguments and show why they're false, just based on their premises alone. Or what I like to do is I like to show the contradictions inherent in the premises. So I did that quite spectacularly, I think, with presuppositional Van Tillian apologetics. I do that as well with young Earth creationism.
Hence, Ember was gonna find it. There you go, everybody.
Thank you, Ember. You're so nice.
We love you, Ember.
Thank you.
The highlights of my last year was me.
But I did that with the Opie paradox in young Earth creationism, which young Earthers still don't have an answer for. Although, to be fair, I haven't really debated anyone about it yet. But that's what I like to do. I like to take people at their face value and say, this is how the world is. And I say, okay, let's grant that. Let's grant that that's how the world is. What are the logical repercussions of that? What does it mean for the world to be like this? And how do you explain the world as it's empirically observed? And so when you start looking at things like that, you start finding weird problems, like the North American opossum for young Earth creationists, I think is literally impossible for them to explain without falling on a horn of a trilemma. And it's a spectacular failure of the prediction of young Earth creationism. Because if you grant a young Earth creationist every single premise that they want, including a miraculous teleportation of the North American opossum from Turkey to North America, but you exclude the possibility of a catastrophic plate tectonics, which requires a separate miracle.
Yeah.
If you do that, you find 3 different problems with the young Earth creationist hypothesis. The first and the biggest one is if you magically teleport the opossum to North America as it is today, you can't explain the fossil record of the North American opossum because it clearly shows the opossum migrating from South America to North America in a very clear, very well understood lineage. So the fossil record has to be lying to you, and God must have laid it down in reverse chronological order, in perfect reverse chronological order, mind you, such that it just completely screws with you, which is the weirdest thing to suggest. So you can't teleport him to North America. If you teleport him to South America, the problem is He's got to migrate from South America to North America, leave all the fossils along the way. The fossils along the way have to be aged in such a way that they can be dated to within however many millions of years that we currently date them as. And then you have an additional problem in that you now need to give up baraminology, which is how young Earth creationists purport to date species, so or kinds. And the problem is the North American opossum cannot breed with the South American opossum.
Oh, I didn't. Wow.
They are separate species.
Wow.
And so that means the North American opossum needs to be on the ark in some fashion. So there's no interbreeding there. Like you go down to Mexico, the North American opossum and the South American opossum, they don't have babies. So, so that's a huge problem. And then you have the other horn is no matter which one you choose, if you disallow teleportation, you still have to explain how did it get here? What happened?
And I guess that's one thing I did wonder. Like, okay, but then I'm thinking about Australia, like all of those marsupials. Marsupials only in Australia, nowhere else.
No, North America.
Yeah,
North America is only marsupial. And to claim that kangaroos floated on a raft to get to Australia, very improbable, but maybe I grant that. You can't be serious when you claim that the North American opossum floated on a raft across the Pacific or the Atlantic, and then somehow passed through terrain that is perfect for an opossum to live in and thrive in, like Western Russia or Europe. Crosses through that somehow, just on this hell-bent march. It's got to get to North America. God commanded it. So it's like, screw living here. I've only got 2 years to live in the wild. Damn it. I'm getting to North America. Gets to North America. And then somehow, if it takes the Pacific route, it has to cross Western America to get to Northeast America, where its fossils are primarily found, before migrating back over to the West somehow, where it's found in spots and places, and the fossils there are younger. So you can't, if you propose rafting across the Pacific, it's confusing as hell. If you purport rafting across the Atlantic, you still have to explain how the opossum survived. And then you have the other problem of the opossum arriving in North America, and then the fossils and all that. So
I'm thinking it was purple. In one of the other streams I was watching, that the whales carried all the animals.
Whales carried all the animals.
I'm thinking it was her.
That hurt.
Said that the whales carried all the animals. All the whales got God summoned the whales to carry all the animals,
like a big cruise ship.
Like a big cruise ship till they got to the ark.
I need to tell you something right now, Kelly. That sentence hurt my soul. That sentence hurt my soul. Oh Lord, is that where they got the story of Pinocchio from? As Jason asks in the chat. Yeah, maybe.
Well, I mean, the whale swallowed Geppetto. I'm looking at it more like Jonah. It was more like Jonah to me.
The young Earth creationists confuse me. They confuse me, especially guys like Matt Powell or Kent Hovind.
Hold on, this is okay. I was right.
After the flood, the great whales acted as Ubers to bring all the animals back to the correct continent.
I knew it was something. I knew someone said that.
You think maybe they got a good tip for that? Did God put in the Uber order, or like individual animals who were like, I can't swim, so could you come pick me up, bro?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I mean, like,
kind of silly arguments that they have. Like,
it's a very strange. Young Earth creation is very strange to me. I don't understand it. That's why I really haven't discussed it on my channel all that much, because it just doesn't line up with empirical reality in the slightest. And so they'll, like, the young Earth creationists will try to will try to destroy a layman's person's confidence in science and then present their option as the only correct alternative. It's a dumbed down version of Van Til's impossibility of the contrary. And it's extremely dumbed down. It's mind-bogglingly stupid. But like, even if your confidence in science is shattered, how can you sit there and think, well, my Bible explains it better? Like, have you read the Bible? have you looked outside your window recently? Because I'm pretty sure the Bible doesn't line up with that. Because you're living in North America right now, not Israel. You talk about North America, right? It doesn't talk about Native Americans, people from South America, the Mayans. Doesn't even. I don't even think the Bible knew the Chinese existed. For God's sakes, how can you read the Bible and think it's all literally true? Like, huh? I don't get it.
Yeah, but that's one thing that an unpopular opinion of myself, maybe others, that when you actually read the Bible, even though we have the Christians that I consider them pretty good people, but the Bible is more on the line with the Christian nationalist point of view. Sorry to say that.
Um,
To my opinion, a lot of times.
it is in a literalist interpretation of the Bible. Yes. If you take the literalist evangelical interpretation of the Bible, it is very much aligned very well with the values of Christian nationalism. And that's kind of where Christian nationalism comes from. It comes from evangelical Christianity, unfortunately. That being said, I mean, I got nothing positive to say on the subject. It sucks. I'm trying my best to be intellectually honest here, but like, I have nothing good to say about Christian nationalism or Christian nationalists.
I don't
So,
either.
like, yeah, it's one of those topics that I tend to avoid, because like, it's not like I won't discuss it, but it's like, God, I have such a hard time framing anything positive about them. Anything. It's so difficult. I don't even know, like, where to start. Like, what's so redeemable about taking a book that was a patchwork of other scriptures, by the way? Just because we're ignoring history here about where the Bible came from.
Mm-hmm.
What is so morally correct and righteous about taking a book that was basically voted on by men to be the correct scripture interpretations, and then treating that as literal, when your own book differs from different sects of your own religion?
Exactly.
I don't understand what the
In the Old
virtue is in that.
Testament, or I mean, when I was evangelical, and they were like, "Well, we don't really look at the Old Testament, because when Jesus died, and that's the New Testament is the way you're supposed to go. But then you do take certain scriptures when you talk about a man should lay with a man, and a children, spit a rod and stuff like that. You use those scriptures. You use what you need to
Yeah, you pick and choose. You
pick and
pick and choose.
choose.
And AJ's right, because there isn't anything positive to say about Christian nationalists, and that's okay to point out. I agree. There's nothing to say. There's nothing positive to say about the movement. But I'm trying to think of this in terms of like intellectual honesty here, and thinking, well, maybe there's some sort of intellectual merit to it. And for the life of me, I can't find it. I just cannot find it. I cannot find anything intellectually fulfilling, satisfying, or even an argument to be made that is not polemical, that is not rhetorical. There's nothing there. It's such a hollow, empty promise of a position to take. Like, that's why I don't generally like focus on things like that, because there's nothing to debate, there's nothing to debunk, there's nothing to break down. You're taking a selective interpretation of the Bible for your own political gains, and that's it. Like, that's the whole argument.
I'm gonna address Deviant's question for you first,
Okay.
and then I have
Have you ever called into Kent Hovind? I swear I recognize you. No, I'm sorry. I have never called into Kent Hovind. I don't respect him as a human being.
I don't either.
I and for me to say that about somebody is tough. Like, I try to give people like the benefit of doubt. There are people who get, trashed on quite a bit. For example, William Lane Craig being called Low Bar Bill. Generally tend to avoid things like that because he does do very defensible theological work. Not necessarily the best intellectual work, but he does do very defensible theological work, and
Yeah.
he is thorough in his papers. I mean, I think his Kalam cosmological argument, he spends like 50 pages building the metaphysical scaffolding to make the argument. So he's very thorough in that regard, and I respect that. But when it comes to people like Kent Hovind or Matt Powell, made by Jim Bob or Jay Dyer, even Darth Dawkins, I don't respect them as human beings.
Yeah.
And that's generally where I draw the line, and why I tend not to like criticize them, because they have to bring their intellectual rigor up a notch, or several notches in some people's cases, before I'll even entertain the idea of breaking down their arguments. I mean, for example, Jay Dyer recently did a video critiquing Professor Dave by being a gigantic racist asshole, doing the quote unquote Jew voice and making references to big noses and gold coins. And why address that? Why spend the time to break down his arguments as if he was a serious intellectual? I just don't see it. It's not worth my time. It's not worth anyone's time. And if you're attracted to that type of person, I think
even
you
know what to
need to
say about you.
reprioritize your life.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm gonna go back a little bit. You were talking about the scriptures and stuff in the Bible. I remember when I was in school, and they talked about the lost books and stuff. They was like, well, these are the books, the holy books that belong in the Bible. And I asked a question. I was like, well, how do we know what books made it or not? And as a kid, I asked that question, and it was like, well, because it was through God and stuff like that. I was like, but how do we know?
So
I never,
your school doesn't
got
actually
that
have a
answer.
story. So what you were taught in school didn't actually have a story.
No, they didn't really tell us about how they just picked the books. They just said because those were the anointed books by God. That's why they were picked. That was
Well,
what my answer was.
see, that's really weird, because like, to me, I learned this in Catholic schools. So because I learned that the Old Testament doesn't have like a clear lineage or a clear history. The Hebrew Bible, the Torah, did I say that like I was Japanese? That was weird. I'm sorry. The Septuagint, I guess, is the one that modern Christianity uses as the Hebrew Bible for them. Its books include things that are not currently accepted in Jewish canon, but they were accepted by early Christians. In terms of like the Bible itself, early Christians had like very different ideas of what were authoritative than what we have today. Like the Gospel of Thomas for one, the Shepherd of Hermas for another.
Yes.
Some communities loved those, others rejected them as heretical. There were Pauline epistles that were rejected because they were anti-Pauline Christians. And then eventually the Pauline sect took over. But even the Gospels, as we know them today, themselves were highly contentious and debated. And all of this was composed like, anywhere between like 50 and 150 years after Jesus's crucifixion. I know that the Council of Nicaea didn't make it, but like there's like the Council of Carthage, which affirmed a New Testament list, but it was more like the Bible was formed more organically than that. They say, oh, it's the Word of God. It wasn't the Word of God. It was people arguing with each other, sometimes killing each other, which nobody really discusses too much. Like, hey, no, my Bible's right. Your Bible sucks. Stab. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah. I
So
talked
like
about the Crusades too
oh,
when I
well, the
was
crusade. Well, the crusades come much later,
yeah, but that
um,
was, yeah.
but like there is a steadying effect around the time of the Dead Sea Scrolls being written or estimated to have been written. There's a steadying effect, but there was still like big textual diversity. So there's no like one true lineage of the Bible. It's more like we have a bunch of scriptures that were distributed, and Paul comes along, creates Pauline Christianity. There's infighting within Christianity for a long time, and eventually all of the Christians sort of just settle on this is the Bible. That's just
Yeah,
kind of what
like
happens by the time I think it's the Council of Carthage. I could be mistaken, but that was
yeah,
like the first real official like a, attestation of a list of what should be in the Bible.
yeah, I didn't understand that. I was like, well, Paul is considered an apostle, but he wasn't alive when Jesus. I didn't understand that, and half the Bible, New Testament, is written by, well, not written, but not
I mean,
literally. We know that that's not true, but written by
well,
Paul.
you know what I find really interesting about the Bible, especially the New Testament? Morology in the New Testament. There's 12 apostles, 12 people at the Last Supper, and the 13th one is Jesus. That's very significant from Greek mythology. It's a translation of
Oh,
Jewish
explain more to
mythology into
that.
it's a translation of Jewish numerology into Greek mythology, and so 12 is kind of like one less than divine, and the divine is like the 13th.
Wow.
I have to go into it. I have to read back into it because it's been a while since I've made the
Okay.
argument. But essentially, the argument basically goes: who the hell were the apostles, and why are there 12 of them, and why is that so convenient to mythological stories we already know existed pre-Christianity? What's that all about?
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting stuff about how it's written, and it tends to lean me towards a Greek mythologizing of Jesus and the Jesus narrative, rather than any sort of real translation of history. While there may be nuggets of history in there, for example, Jesus was executed by Pontius Pilate. Like that would be an absolute mundane fact. I
Yeah.
won't like debate that. Like, oh, some Jewish guy in Roman Palestine got executed by Pilate, huh? And so,
Meant
but
I
there's
will look highlight Purple's statement that she said. One of the
what
questions I asked as a child was, why did we only have 4 gospels when Jesus had 12 apostles? Why didn't we get to hear from the other 2/3 of his closest followers had to say?
well, because the gospels aren't his apostles. They're not written by his apostles. That's why.
Yeah, but as a
uh,
child, I wasn't until, well, a few years ago that I realized that. Because I was
really?
always taught that Mark wrote Mark, John wrote John,
It's
Luke wrote
fascinating.
Luke, Matthew wrote Matthew. That's what I was taught.
But okay, so because when I grew up in the Catholic school, I was not taught that. I was taught that these were anonymous authors, and these were the names that were
Oh, that's
attributed to
different.
them.
But you're like 10 years younger than me, give or take.
I'm 43
I'm
now.
I'm 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 a 51.
Okay,
So
yeah.
yeah, when I was taught, they were literal,
Well,
written by those literal people.
keep in mind though. Keep in mind though. I went to Catholic school, and you probably went to an evangelical Protestant.
I went to Catholic school as
Did
well.
you? Okay,
Yes, I did. I went to
interesting.
Catholic school, and I went to Catholic college for a few years. But yes, we were taught literally those people. Now I can see it where they mention it as well in the Bible and the books and stuff. But no, when I was taught, that was who
Okay,
wrote the books.
that's fair.
Yes,
That's
yes, yes.
fair.
Moses wrote a lot of the Old Testament.
Moses wrote it.
That's what
Okay.
we were taught. That's what we were taught.
Moses. Yeah, Moses. Wonderful,
But then
wonderful
we also
Moses.
were taught Latin. We had to speak Latin also
Yes.
in school.
I don't remember any of it. I don't remember a
Yeah, I
word
don't
of
either.
Latin.
I don't either. And we had to, and it was funny because I went to Catholic school, and so when I got like in the fourth grade, my mom realized that tuition is cheaper if you actually are Catholic. So we became Catholic. But my aunt went to, she also was Catholic. Well, my great aunt, she was my grandma's sister.
Mm.
But their whole service was in Latin. They said nothing in
Yeah.
English. But our Catholic church, it had little segments of Latin, but the whole thing basically was English. And I was
So
sitting there like, what in the hell am I?
I had a really interesting upbringing because I was Catholic on both sides of the family. However, I was Italian Catholic on my dad's side. I was Ukrainian Catholic, which is
Oh,
closer
wow.
to Eastern Orthodox on my mom's side. And so when I went to my mom's church, they would recite everything in Ukrainian.
Oh, wow.
And it was the more conservative Catholicism where they had where they practiced more Eastern Orthodoxy type of Catholicism. They had the whole service behind a screen, and the audience couldn't participate directly, and you had to drink wine to drink the blood and then have communion. Whereas with the my dad's side, the Italian Catholic side, it was more of that traditional Catholicism. Everybody, let's stand. I was an altar boy at one point as well, which is probably no surprise to hear.
Yeah.
It was an interesting
I
upbringing.
was a little jealous of the altar boys because y'all got to leave, were the ones that get to leave class a lot of times. Now I'm
Yes.
glad I was not an altar boy.
I
But when I
mean,
was younger
listen,
as a kid, I want to get out of class.
listen. There are trade-offs to everything in life. And for those of you who don't understand what we're talking about, go look up why the Catholic Church in New York City played musical chairs with its priests in the mid-90s.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'm going to talk about it more, but I did, even though I was like, I became evangelical once I got to high school. So this was my own leaving, finding my own
Mhm.
path of righteousness, as I'm going to say. But I
Path of
did work.
righteousness. I like that.
I did um work for the Catholic Church for a few years.
Mm.
Um, I worked. Ironically enough, I started out in the immigration department as a secretary,
Okay.
helping illegal immigrants get to this country, become legal citizens. Funny how ironic things are now. And then I left and went to the Cardinals division because they paid more money in that department.
Sorry, I'm getting a little warm in the Opie costume.
Oh yeah, well, that's understandable. Yeah, but we could talk for probably another hour or so, but it is time to wrap up because I do have to.
Okay.
As soon as I have to get ready for work in like 30, be out of there doing like 30 minutes or so.
That's fair.
30
That's
minutes or
fair.
less. Now, where can anybody find you?
I'm Felicia by nature on YouTube. I have a Discord as well. If you check out my video, my descriptions will have a link to the Discord. If you want to hang out there, that's cool. I don't really do debate. It's more of a dumb fun Discord. It's not a hardcore atheist Discord or anything like that. But you're more than welcome to hang out if you want to.
Oh,
We
so you
do.
have access. Okay, because I know that I'm in the chat with you with Helen, but I didn't know that you had your own Discord as well.
Yeah, it's not a for serious Discord. If you want to debate me on presuppositionalism or you want to debate me at all, don't, because you're better off doing a long form response to me and that'll get more of a reaction from me than debate me, bro, debate me. Like, no, I'm not.
No, I'm gonna say this. I mean, you were like about nine, maybe nine, well, maybe 8 years younger than me. You was a little more knowledgeable than me. I'm looking up to
I
you now.
I still well the problem with
I look
being
up
me
to
is that
you.
listen, the problem with being me is that I don't stop reading and I don't stop learning and my head is
Well,
full of
that's
nonsense.
great. Yeah,
Well, my head's also full of nonsense
I
too.
am
So
real. I really look up to you, and there's another great conversation every time I watch. I need to watch your stuff now. I didn't even get a channel, but this is the conversation that I've
well, thank you.
listened to where you've been on, and I am really like,
I'm glad. Well, you know what? My goal is to make people think better, not to change your mind about things, but to make you think better. Because I feel like the conversation between atheists and theists have hit and have for a long time have exhausted the potential well of intellectual conversation. And so I feel like the only way forward for this conversation is to help people think better. Investigate your own motives, investigate your own worldview, and logically learn how to properly internally critique not only your own worldview but other worldviews as well. How to accept somebody else's worldview and then operate within that framework will help you become a much better intellectual adversary, if you will.
But isn't that better? Get people to think instead of
Mhm.
somebody just setting someone up to have to change their opinions of like why
It
they
doesn't.
come with those. Why did you come to that conclusion of why you think that is right or wrong? To me, it's better
Because
logically.
I find that much more interesting. I find watching PBS much more entertaining than I do find watching Family Guy.
Yeah,
That's what it comes down to. That's the type of person I am.
yeah. I remember I used to love Nova.
Nova was great. I
I
loved Nova. But
used to
that's
watch
but it's
Nova.
also why I wrote the Opie Paradox. It's also why I'm working on relational atheism. I think it's intellectually worthwhile. I think it's pretty strong, especially from some of the questions it poses, and it poses very difficult questions for theists that a lot of them either aren't prepared for because they haven't trained intellectually. They've only trained like basically flashcards for debate me bro style
Yeah,
debates. And when you ask them these questions, they either when you ask them these questions, they either flounder on it or they dismiss you because they're just not prepared to have that deep of an intellectual conversation.
because I remember we had to what you call share your faith. Go to random people. So many times it'll be like, oh, we're gonna go to the mall. We're gonna have a good time. But if you didn't share your faith to so many people, every time we went out, it was a problem. And I remember we always had a script that we had to say, certain scriptures that we had to highlight. And then when it was somebody that knew a little bit more than I did, and they was, well, what about this? And somebody was, well, I'm an atheist. And I was like,
Be still in my heart. What?
and so you could, when it was the more advanced discipleship leaders, they called them, would come over, like take over the conversation. They could see that I was like getting like stuck trying to say things. Like I thought I knew everything, but I didn't. So that was
Yep.
kind of funny though. But yeah, it was from a script, and once somebody went off that script, I didn't know
Yep.
what else to say.
Yeah, that's it's
I
unfortunate, but
wasn't
you
thinking
need.
for myself. I was thinking, I was just listening to what they were telling me, what was right or wrong, whatever.
Yeah, and that's the unfortunate thing. That's the unfortunate trap of apologetics is that people will just listen to it because it's entertaining and because it makes them feel good, but they won't listen to the actual failures, structural failures, and the critical thought process that happened. And so I feel like it's important to learn that before even an atheist counter argument can be understood.
We'll
Well,
talk
Kelly,
about some of you guys. Yes, so I'm gonna
it's
plug myself.
yeah.
Hold on one second. We about to leave. Tomorrow, Dr. Kip Davis will be
Oh,
on, and we are going to be talking about the similarities and differences between biblical slavery and chattel slavery.
interesting.
So that will be an interesting conversation. That's going to be one of our Black History Month discussions. I was trying to get more into Black history, but I did not get the amount of Black guests that I wanted on. But neither here nor there.
Well, at least I did the respectful thing and I did not show up in blackface.
I appreciate that. Once again, I thank you for coming on. You have any closing statements for our wonderful viewers viewing now and going to view later?
No, check out my channel though, Felicia by Nature, where I'll be releasing a series of videos on relational atheism. Which, if you're interested in hearing about it, it'll be a complex topic and there'll be multiple videos. But I think it's worth investigating. Thanks so much for having me, Kelly.
Thank you so much for being here. Thanks everyone for tuning in. See you guys tomorrow, 1 p.m.
Peace.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride.